to an evening of story encompassing misadventure, insight, some resolution and discovery. John McMillan, who will speak tonight, is a gifted storyteller, one who can spin you into his own world, to inspire and inform you, to enlighten and challenge you, to drop you down and then to lift you up. Welcome to his world. I'm not going to preempt John's story, that's his to tell. Rather, I'd like to outline where he's come from to arrive here tonight. While listening to him recently, when he asked me to introduce him tonight, I was keenly aware that his life, although uniquely his own journey, in many ways mirrors all of our own. We all have good and not so good times, and sometimes downright bad ones. But we as humans are all subject to forces beyond our control, to good and bad decisions, events that shape our lives. We all live within a broad tapestry that makes our time on this great earth our own. Our lives are not unlike the path that water takes across this earth. Parts are sparkling, bubbling across a safe sandy bed. Parts are through rocky, dangerous paths, even over waterfalls to uncertain landing below. Some parts are deep and mysterious pools. It would seem that John has encountered most of these waterscapes. They've shaped and sculpted him. His life experiences have included working in five-star hospitality, landscape gardening, writing, music, guiding others through troubled waters, and public speaking to explain, to help, and to encourage. He calls himself a mindscaper, one who has used the experiences of his life to sculpt minds and imaginations, to help many on the pathways to becoming the masterpieces that they were designed to be, to use the words of an old headmaster friend of mine. John has looked deep into his soul and been forced to confront the hard questions that inevitably begin with why and are closely followed by what, often with more questions along the way. Has he got all the answers? Probably not. But he's surely on the right path to finding his own answers and to helping others find theirs. The very essence of John is his unwavering spirit, to use his experiences as stepping stones to get to where he is today. A man at peace with himself and his world and his past. But it's been a roller coaster ride. And I let him tell you, I give you John McMillan.
Thanks, Claire. Hi, friends. My name's John, as Claire just said. And what I'd like to begin with is three threads that were to weave themselves together into what was to become the fabric of my life. The first thread that I'll share with you is that I was adopted. Now, I have always known that I was adopted. Mum and Dad had let me know right from the beginning. I cannot even remember when I was told that I was adopted, but it had become quite clear in my later years that, see, my whole thinking process around my adoption was that it had nothing to do with anything. I just got on with my life, everything was going well, so I thought. But for all the work that I've done around it, it had become quite clear that the adoption and my thought process around that led me to believe that I made up this thought that if my natural mother can give me away, how much can I be worth? So right from the get-go, there's a very deep unconscious thread of worthlessness. A little bit of backstory about my biological parents. My biological mum was pretty young. She was only 18 or 19 years old, and she was an unwed country girl, pregnant, unmarried, 1965, uncool. So she was actually forced by her family to come up here to Sydney, and for the last 3 months of the pregnancy she spent here in Sydney. And I spent the first 5 weeks of my life in Darlinghurst in St Margaret's Hospital, and till Mum and Dad came to pick me up. We've got about an hour together tonight, so when I say to you Mum and Dad, these are the people who came to pick me up out of hospital. So that's the little bit of story about my biological mum. There is not very much information on my biological father, except that he was from North Pacific. I like to think he was from Hawaii, hence the nice tan and the big nostrils. But that's the only information on him. So there's that first thread that I've shared with you. There's a very deep unconscious thread of worthlessness. I've made up a belief in my head that if my natural mother can give me away, how much can I be worth? The second one is that I was a very, very sick kid. And the first 10 years of my life, the first 120 months, I spent 57 months of those in hospital for my asthma, nearly dying 9 times before I was 10 years old. So I was a pretty sick kid. So you can imagine my mum and dad's fear of losing their firstborn, whether that be biological or adopted. Losing that firstborn. Mum's fear presented as her being understandably strict and really not allowing me to learn to live life on life's terms, learning to make mistakes. See, I'm beginning to look outside of me for validation, not understanding that ought come from within. And because of this I grew up here in Sydney on the northern beaches, and very, very normal. No addiction, no alcoholism in my family. Very happy-go-lucky, lucky-go-crazy, middle-class, average, loving, kind, generous, compassionate upbringing, with my parents doing the best they could with what they had. And Mum and Dad's fear of them losing their firstborn presented as Mum being pretty strict, and understandably so, and not really allowing me to learn to live life on life's terms. So I'm growing up to be really irresponsible because I'm not learning to respond to life on life's terms. So that's response-able, you know. So I'm growing up to be really irresponsible. So there's that first thread of worthlessness, that second thread of irresponsibility. Is what I'm sharing with you making sense? Yes? Good. The third thread I'll share with you is what happens with all of us, and that's puberty. I was a late bloomer. I didn't kick off till I was about 13 and a half. But between 13 and a half and 19, I went from 5'4" and 48 kilos to 6'3" and 102 in the space of 6 years. So I'm more than doubled in weight, thankfully not in height. And by the time I get to 19 years old, there's these unconscious threads going on. Don't feel very good about myself because of that unconscious thread of worthlessness. Not very responsible. But then in those years between, say, 13, 14, 15, 16, I'm becoming exceedingly interested in the opposite sex. And as they were me, it was those years, it's the late 70s, it's the early 80s, it's the beach culture, there's all that sort of thing going on. And they're expressing an interest in me, and I've practically doubled in size in the space of 5 years. What they were doing was expressing what was going on for them. What was going on for me is that I was looking for somebody to tell me who I am. Does that make sense? I'm looking for somebody to tell me who I am. And it was in there that I have all these girls saying, "Oh my God, John, I haven't seen you for years." And I was going to the gym, I'm able to ride my bike, I'm able to swim, I'm able to spend hours and hours and hours down in the bush riding my bike and running around like a chicken with my head cut off and feeling fit as a fiddle. Remember, I shared with you those first 10 years of my life was difficult to breathe. Before that advent of Ventolin, which was 1970, the medication that was given, I don't remember this, but Mum shared it with me. That medication that was given to me made me so sick, I was able to breathe, but made me so sick I was unable to do anything else. So here we am 10 years later, and I'm able to run around, and I'm able to swim, and I felt so good in my body. And I've got all these girls telling me, oh my God, John, look at you, look at your muscles. My fragile ego had taken that they were telling me how I'm supposed to be. All they were doing was telling me what they were thinking. And I, in that gap there, thought that I knew everything. It was bulletproof, typical teen. I call it the wanker factor, yes? See, by the time I get to 19 years old, and I didn't even know about this, worthless, irresponsible, wanker, and I didn't even know. I've got to backtrack a little bit. I had my first drink when I was about 14 or 15 years old, not to change the way that I felt about myself. You'll hear it in the rooms of recovery. You hear it about in treatment centres that there's two types of alcoholism. And they actually don't call it alcoholism anymore. It's actually been taken out of the DSM. They call it alcohol abuse disorder. Alcohol abuse disorder. So there's two types of that. There's that primary and the secondary. Primary one being when that person has their first drink and it colours them in, switches them on, changes their life from colour TV, from black and white to colour TV, and they can't stop drinking. And there's the second, mine wasn't like that. Mine was secondary. A bad habit was to progress into what is called secondary alcoholism. But I had my first drink 14, 15 years old, and just a very curious, still am, very curious person. And I don't remember the exact dynamic, but what I do remember is that Mum would have a bottle of wine in the fridge, and I would love to pull the cork out and just sniff that. Or Dad would have a bottle of Johnny Walker in the pantry, and I used to love cracking the top of it and sniff. It doesn't bode very well, does it? Sniffing the top of that bottle. And I would see Dad have a scotch. I would see Mum have a glass of wine, and I'd watch their behaviour shift, relax, laugh, and I was very curious as to what this was in the bottle. So one day I decided to try it. So you can imagine pouring ethyl alcohol, which is a poison, in on top of a fresh, young, clean, sick body. I got so violently ill, because I drank quite a bit of it. It was my first hangover, that I was actually able to say to myself, if this is what it is to have a hangover, I'm not going to do it again. And I didn't. I didn't do it again for another 2 or 3 years. But we're into the early 80s, and I've shared with you how my headset and how my mindset was, where I'm living and going to school and playing with, and got some extraordinarily kind and loving and generous friends. And we are spending a lot of time down the beach, we're spending a lot of time in the bush, we're drinking beers every now and then. We go up to the bowling club and I'd have 3 or 4 beers, and then that'll be that. Every now and then I'd turn it on and get very drunk again, and then the next morning decide, this is stupid, I'm not going to do it again, and I wouldn't. But things were slowly progressing. I've shared with you those 3 threads that were going on in my life, where I didn't feel very good about myself, where I wasn't very responsible, and at the same time I thought I was king shit. I've spent a long time in the hospitality industry, but I'd been in the hospitality industry for 2 or 3 years, still living at home, 19, 20 years old, and I'd finished up this job actually here in North Sydney, and I thought it'd be a good idea to go on a holiday. So what I did was pinned a map of Australia up on the wall, and I had one dart, and where that dart landed was where I was going to go on holiday. So I threw that dart, and that dart landed on a place called Palm Cove. Those of you that may be geographically challenged, that's about half an hour drive north of Cairns, 40 minutes drive south of Port Douglas. And not my most spectacular idea, but I spent the next 41 hours on a bus up there. Now, for a guy who can't sit still for 5 minutes, that was excruciating. But as soon as I arrived in far north Queensland, I don't know what it was. I look back now and maybe it was genetics, I don't know, but I fell in love with it. I fell in love with it. I didn't know when I waved goodbye to Mum, I'll see you in 2 weeks, that I wasn't to see Mum again for another 2 years. And that 2-week holiday actually took me a total of 5 years to come back into Sydney. And I was in that space there where things were going to progress. I'm on this 2-week holiday. I was there for a week, and I'm on the stretch of sand at Palm Cove, and I just fell in love with the coconut. You've been, you guys, any of you guys been up there? Yeah, you know what it's like. I fell in love with it, and I'm on holidays, and I didn't have a job, and I had a little bit of money, and I was free. And I don't know who does this while they're on holidays, but I walked into this beautiful resort across the road from the beach in my Speedos and asked them if they had any jobs. And they must have been desperate because they interviewed me on the spot. I put a towel on, thank you. And I was to start work 2 days later. And that was the beginning of living and working and playing with some extraordinarily interesting people that I don't know how it is now. I haven't been up there for a while, but far north Queensland then was a place in the sun for shady people, and I fit right in, and I had no idea that I'd fit right in. And I'm working really, really hard. I'm working in this beautiful resort. I'm meeting literally thousands of international tourists. I'm learning to speak 8 or 9 different languages. I'm living and working and playing with some, like I said, some very interesting people. Interesting is John code word for some real fucking whack jobs. And as I said, I fit right in without me actually knowing that I'd fit right in. There's that thread of irresponsibility. At the same time, I'm not feeling very good about myself. And at the same time, I thought that I was bulletproof. And, you know, there's that wanker factor. And my drinking is beginning to progress, not for wanting to change the way that I felt about myself, but more so to keep up with the people that I was living and working and playing with. The hospitality industry, I have not been in it for a very long time now, and I imagine it's still the same, but it is an industry where work hard, play hard, and that's exactly what I did. We know I'd start work at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, not finish till midnight, and then it'll be into town, not getting home till 6 or 7 in the morning, rinse, repeat, 6 days a week, 7 days a week. And my drinking is beginning to escalate, not so much in frequency, but more so in volume. 5 or 6 beers a day on a Tuesday or a Wednesday would turn into 5 or 6 beers a day, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and in the space of 9 to 10 months, I've got people coming to me and saying, John, we love you, we love living with you, we love working with you, we love playing with you, but man, when you drink, you are just insane. And we've got our idea of what mad means, what insane means, and I'll share with you one story. So when I say to you insane, when I say to you mad, you've got a frame of reference, all right? I have these people telling me this behaviour. Don't go. I'd hear it. I'd hear it in the surf club, or I'd hear it in the nightclubs in town. And with them, I'd catch these whispers of, you know, he's a nice guy, but when he drinks, you're not going to wake up in the gutter. You're not going to wake up in a strange girl's bed. You're going to wake up in a different country. And I'll share with you one story where my drinking took me, that being that about 2 o'clock in the morning, with a bottle of vodka under my belt, I stole a friend of mine's GSX 1100, then one of the most powerful road bikes on the planet. I knew how to ride, but at 2 o'clock in the morning, I stole my friend's GSX 1100 in a monsoon with a bottle of vodka under my belt and rode it from Palm Cove up to Port Douglas along that coastal road. That's a 90-minute round trip on a stolen bike, drunk, uninsured, unlicensed, in a monsoon, in the nude. I put a helmet and gloves on, thank you. No, helmet and boots. But there it is. That is the definition of insanity for me. And I look back now, And I really think it was a primal scream for attention mixed up with a death wish. I really do. Pouring alcohol in on top of what was going on for me unconsciously, where I didn't feel very good about myself, but at the same time, it's exceedingly confusing because I've got all these people telling me that I'm great. And there's that undercurrent of worthlessness going on at the same time. Plus, I'm not really, and I have not really learned to respond to life on life's terms. I'm in the body of a man with the mind of a child, exceedingly immature and a very, very confusing time for me. And then I'm pouring alcohol on top of that. Things are not going to bode very well. And things were progressing. And at this particular stage, I'd had an accident, a motorcycle accident, and I was wearing clothes, thank you. And I'd banged myself up pretty hard. And it was about a 4 or 5 month healing. And the girl that I was living with at this particular stage, I'd been in a relationship with some really kind, generous women. They were able to handle John. They're just not able to handle John and John's drinking. And so it was to come to be with this particular girl that I was living with. And I'm in the process of healing. And I'm off work for about 3 or 4 months. And she came to me. She was sick and tired of my behaviour, where I'd just disappear for days. Or, I'd just exhibit stuff like I've just shared with you. And she was terribly concerned about it. But again, she's very kind, and I don't think she was able to come to me and saying, John, you're being a dick, and we need to have a break. What she said to me was, John, I want to go to Europe. And I thought, what a great idea. Let me get better. Go back to work, put some money together, and we'll go. And she goes, no, I want to go now. And within a week, she'd gone. So what happened in that space there for me was that, unbeknownst to me, it had touched upon, here's another girl that I deemed to be really important in my life. It had touched upon me something that I didn't even know that existed, where this unconscious thought process that my biological mother has given me away, where there's this undercurrent of worthlessness. I'm not feeling very good about that. And here's this other girl that I deemed really important in my life giving me away. How do you suppose I was going to feel? It was horrible. I was distraught. I was grief-stricken. I felt really guilty. I was ashamed of my behaviour. And the only way I knew how to alleviate the pain of that was to continue to drink, which was only exacerbated the cycle. And she was, this is all pre-mobile phone and texting each other, and both my boys have been in Europe and we can see where they are and we can talk to them instantaneously. This is pre all that. This is handwritten letters and a bag of 20 and 50 cent pieces down in the public phone box by the general store. And we're talking once a week, or we'd write a handwritten letter, put it in the thing and lick the stamp, send it, and 10 to 14 day turnaround. So she'd been away for a while, and I'm trying to get it together. It was pretty straightforward to be able to heal, get back to work, put some money together, buy a ticket to London, go. But because of what I was feeling, here's another girl. This is all unconscious. Another girl giving me away. I don't feel very good about that. I don't feel very good about myself. I'm feeling guilty, and I'm feeling ashamed about it. I'm pouring alcohol in on top of that. I'm unable to get it together. I'm lurching from job to job all over North Queensland. And I look back now and I was truly blessed. Hayman Island, Dunk Island, Lizard, Badara, Daydream, working on all these islands. Drunk, not feeling very good about myself, and looking outside of me for something that I had no idea was going on inside of me. I'm looking for these answers outside of me. I'm looking for somebody to tell me what was going on. Please help me. I have no idea. And all of that was deeply unconscious, lurching from crisis to crisis to crisis. And anyways, this girl I was living with, we're talking to each other, and she finally relented, and she said, look, I will come back from England, and I hope you get it together, and then we'll go. And I thought, wow, okay, great. So I tidied up the house and had a shower and had a shave. And supposed to meet her at the airport. I'm flying back into Sydney, catching a domestic flight up to Cairns International Airport. I'll be there this date, this time. Here's the flight number. And she wasn't on the flight. I'm waiting at the airport. She wasn't on the flight. She wasn't even on the manifest. And the next 3 days were absolutely terrifying because there was no contact. I rang back into London where she was, and they were, no, she's already left. We don't know where she is. And here I am for the next 3 days, absolutely terrified, until I received the typical Dear John letter. That in essence, what it said was, funnily enough, Dear John, I'm really sorry, I should have told you this before, but I've met a really nice guy and I'm staying here and I'm getting married. It was in the lines of that letter that I've crossed what's called in the rooms of recovery, that thin red line from heavy social drinking into active addiction, unbeknownst to me, unconsciously, unbeknownst to me. The only way I knew how to alleviate the guilt and the shame and the pain of all that was to continue to drink. And all that was doing was pouring gasoline on an already raging inferno. That was to set the tone for the next 2 years of complete and utter mess. I'm 27, 28 years old, lurching from country to country, job to job, relationship to relationship, not recognising that the biggest problem I had in my life was not my drinking, but it was the thinking about my drinking. I had no idea that if I was to shift one thought, the whole trajectory of my life would have changed. I'd have people come to me and say, John, man, you know, why do you drink so much? And I would truthfully say to them and look them in the eye, the reason I drink so much is because I have all these problems. Not recognising I had all the problems because I drank so much. And if I had that backwards, what else did I have backwards? I'd finally lurched and limped, broken and bruised and battered back into Sydney, and we're right up into 1994 now, and you know, in and out of different relationships and trying to work and not work, and so very, very sick. I'm drinking daily and with no idea what was actually going on for me. Everybody outside of me could see it, but I couldn't, because I was so ashamed and I felt so guilty about my behaviour. The only way I knew how to alleviate that was to continue to drink. And as I said, everybody outside of me could see it. And then the three most powerful women in my life, my mother, my sister, and who I call now a future ex-girlfriend, because shortly into the future she was going to be an ex-girlfriend, they conspired to get me at this moment. And they got me early before I started drinking this day, and Mum was extraordinarily concerned about my behaviour, and Mum had been looking for ways to get better. And we went out for breakfast this day, and Mum said to me, "You're sick and tired of being sick and tired, aren't you?" And I'd never heard that before. I'd never heard it. Mum's done her research. "You're sick and tired of being sick and tired, aren't you?" And she got me straight away. I tell you, Mum should have worked in advertising, because what I bought this day, I bought it hook, line and sinker. Mum said to me, "There's this new hospital that's opened up at Curl. You might want to go in there for a bit of a rest." South Pacific Private Hospital now is Australia's leading treatment centre. I had no idea that what I was about to enter was not only to totally change the trajectory of my life, but I've got this idea in my head. You remember what I said to you, 28 years old, the body of a man with the mind of a child, I'm about to enter what was to become Australia's leading treatment centre for what was going on for me, alcoholism. I'm thinking I'm going to a holiday farm where I'm going to learn to drink like a gentleman. We're going to have a bit of a rest and have a bit of a lie down. I got the shock of my life. I was in that place for 35 days. And for the first time in my life, I'm introduced to the idea of the disease process of alcoholism and more importantly, introduced to the idea that John, maybe, just maybe, you may be an alcoholic. How do you think that was going to go over? I've shared with you what was going on. I thought that I was king shit, that I knew everything, and at the same time what I'm doing is totally destroying my life. Everybody outside of me could see it, and I still couldn't see it. I went into this treatment centre with the mind of a child, treating that program the way one would do a TAFE course, or go to college to do some sort of, you go to night college and learn how to type. I treated it like that, not understanding that if I was to pay it one iota of attention, it would have very, very swiftly changed my life. But I'm not able to see that. Every single doctor and nurse, therapist, counsellor, psychologist and psychiatrist are extraordinarily concerned about my behaviour. Because I'm unable to, what they say in that hospital, to trust the process and just allow what to happen, and to get with the program that they deliver in concert with the 12-step program can change people's lives. But it wasn't to be. I'm in that hospital for 35 days. And as I said to you, I treated it like doing a TAFE course, like doing a TAFE degree. And as soon as I was out of that hospital, right, done, dusted, I'm out. And as I said, doctors, nurses, counsellors, therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, extraordinarily concerned that I hadn't got it. Of course I hadn't got it. I'm out of that hospital for 6 days, trying to get it back together, loaded with a head full of knowledge and a belly full of bad manners. And on that 6th day, what I call the fuck it switch went off. Fuck it. Fuck it. That's it. I had a friend of mine who had no idea, number one, the capacity to which I was drinking, and number two, that I had a problem with the alcohol anyway, and number three, he had no idea that I'd been in a facility like that. Hadn't seen each other for a few months. He rang me, he said, it's Gaz's birthday, we're going to play some pool down in Kirribilli. Come on down. And that's when the switch went off, and I thought, right, that's it, I'm going to have a drink. Relapsing, first, second, third, fourth time around, however many times, is relatively normal when one is changing the trajectory of one's life. I was to relapse multiple times because I was so used to mucking things up. That was my go-to mechanism to alleviate the pain. That was the only way I knew how to alleviate the pain of what was going on for me. The only way. And here I am beginning to participate in something that, if I'd paid attention, would have begun to change the trajectory of my life. Would have. But it didn't, because I didn't pay any attention to it. I would default back into drinking again. And at that moment, that's what happened. Now, at the end of my drinking, then, a 6-pack of beer and half a bottle of vodka was enough to get me going till about 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. That was just enough just to get me over the edge, stop the jitters, settle the head down, and for me to be able to bumble about my day. 6-pack of beer and half bottle of vodka is a considerable amount of alcohol, in particular when I've been in a facility for 5 weeks and then I'm out for a week. I've had no alcohol in my body for 6 weeks, and the switch went off when Gazza said, we're going to play some pool, and I bought a 6-pack of beer and a half bottle of vodka and I drank it, all of it. And when I drink that, I come up with really good ideas. Like, let's drive. In the next 4 hours, I drove. I nearly knocked 2 coppers off their motorcycles who were following me, weaving all over Pittwater Road in Narrabeen. I was arrested. Ultimately, I was to lose my licence for 42 months, $3,500 fine and a 5-year good behaviour bond because I nearly knocked 2 policemen off their motorcycles. The girl I was living with left. The apartment, the real estate that had rented me this beautiful little granny flat up in Clareville reneged on the lease, and I had to move back in with my mum in the space of 4 hours. How do you suppose I was feeling? not very well about myself. Now, living with mum was okay. I was living with mum and my stepdad. Interesting. Lloyd, my stepdad, he did the best he could with what he had. And he was very bootstrapped. Why can't you just stop drinking? You know, we were two bulls in this house. I'm drinking, young bull, he's an old bull, and we weren't going to get on. And it was difficult. He couldn't understand why I couldn't stop drinking. I couldn't understand why I couldn't stop drinking. The only way I could deal with the confusion of that was to continue to drink. And so I was very blessed and very grateful to have a roof over my head, to have the love of mum, have food on the table and a bed. And I defaulted back into what I was good at, which is looking after restaurants. And it's interesting how we attract each other. I got a job over in Berrima looking after this restaurant for a guy. And in the interview, he said to me, "Do you drink?" And I said, "A little bit." He said to me, this is what he said to me, he said, "You can drink as much as you like, as long as it doesn't affect your work and you replace it on a weekly basis." Within 5 weeks, he came to me and goes, "Jesus, you drink a lot." Still didn't get it. Still didn't get it. It was in that gap there. We're into October 1995. Two very well-meaning friends were to introduce me to a girl, and we come together like two little peas in a pod. She was only about 8 or 9 months out of a very financially and emotionally abusive relationship. And I've just shared with you what was going on for me. I'm looking for somebody to fix. No, pardon me. She's looking for somebody to fix. I'm looking for somebody to fix me. Come together like two little peas in the pod. But you know when you meet somebody, you know that you know that you know that you know. We put the fun into dysfunction at the beginning of a relationship. Within 11 days of meeting each other, I asked her to marry me. There must have been something going on because she said yes. Within 11 months after that, we were married, and 6 months after that, our twin boys were born. Now, when you're barreling along the highway of life at 500 miles an hour and a big boulder rolls out in front of you, all hell is going to break loose. But all hell broke loose before then. Unconsciously, I knew that I really should get it together. Before this particular girl I was beginning to go out with found out how much I was drinking. We're living up at a place called Wendouree Park. That's halfway up the Central Coast, across the river from Spencer right down. And we're looking after this pole home for a friend of ours. And it was beautiful. It was in the bush, and we had this gorgeous deck overlooking the Hawkesbury River. And it's like 90 stairs up to the house, which is hard enough to negotiate up sober, let alone coming down when you're drunk. And Mandy'd had a trip booked away to go skiing before we'd actually met. Now we've got all these people around us going, "What the hell are you doing? You've only known each other for half an hour and you're living together, you're going to get married, all that sort of jazz." Mandy's off for 2 weeks. And I know in the bottom of my mind and the bottom of my heart and the back of my mind that I had to get it together in that 2 weeks. I had to get it together because she is going to find out how much I've been drinking, either by default or by me being honest. And I couldn't be honest. I couldn't be honest with myself, let alone anybody else. So my best thinking got me this idea, and this is a really good idea, that, right, Mandy's gone away for 2 weeks, I'm going to buy as much alcohol as I possibly can and just get it into me, because I'm not going to be able to drink ever again. That is just insane. Any sort of normal person wouldn't do that, but that's what I did. And my thinking was that I used to have this big blue sports bag, and so I emptied all the sports stuff out of that, and I kept it in the bath, and that's where all the vodka bottles went and all the alcohol bottles went. And we're living north of the Hawkesbury River. Hawkesbury River Bridge rather, and where we took our rubbish then, at that time, was to physically take the rubbish and leave it at the bins at the north of Hawkesbury River Bridge. So my thinking is, rightio, I'm going to drink myself silly. She's not going to know. I'm the only one who's going to know. I'm going to take this bag and I'm going to empty it at the bin at the top of the Hawkesbury River Bridge. What happens to me when I drink is I forget. So I've forgotten about this bag. So the beginning of our new relationship, you know, it's all very lovey-dovey. I hadn't seen Mandy for a couple of weeks. It's all very lovey-dovey. She's come back and I picked her up at the airport. And we're just so in love. Comes back. And it's one of those beautiful spring days. Got the barbie going out on the deck. You could see the sun glinting on the river below. And a glass of champagne. I'm having one beer. Mandy's gone up to that room and found that bag. And I heard the intake of breath. And I knew that I was busted, pants down, nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. She's picked up that bag, down into that kitchen, bag onto the bench. She's looked me in the eye and she said, "Is there something you need to tell me?" But for the first time in my life, it was as if this quantum window had opened up in front of me and I could see me for what I was. Garden variety alcohol who needed some help. First time in my life, I was not only honest to myself, but I was honest to another human being. Where she said to me, "Is there something you need to tell me?" And I said to her, "You know what, bub? I think I have a problem with my drinking." She said to me, "You think?" But what she said with me, I will never forget. She grabbed my hands and sat me down and she said to me, "John, there is something far more vast running through you than you can possibly see right now, sweetheart." She said, "You're sick and I want you to get better and I want to stick around to see it happen." That was not the first time that I'd been met with kindness, but it was the first time that I'd heard it. And I wasn't to put the drink down that day, I wasn't to stop that day, but it was the beginning of the end of my drinking then. And then we'd found out that we were pregnant, Mandy was pregnant, and then the twins were born, and it was hard. It was very, very hard for Mandy because I'd found my way back into the rooms of recovery, and I'm beginning to learn what it is to not drink. I've been drinking for years, daily, and I'm beginning to learn about life not drinking and how to do that, and I'm mucking things up all the time. The first 18 months of our relationship, probably the first 2 years, was really difficult for Mandy because I'm beginning to learn to live what it is to be sober, and it was hard. And she had twin boys, and bringing them up on her own with a husband who's having trouble, it was really tough on her. But slowly but surely, I'd not drink for a week or two or three and then a month, and those months would turn into a year, and then 1 year would turn into three, and three would turn into six, and 6 years turned into seven. But it's in that seventh year things began to go a little bit awry, where things were going so extraordinarily well in our lives, our relationship, the kids, financially, vocationally, socially, physically, mentally, spiritually. Things were going really, really well. And I was so unused to things going well that I didn't even recognise what was going on in me. And I wasn't able to speak it to another person, how absolutely terrified I was about how well things were going. Does that make sense? Sounds really weird when I say it, doesn't it? But I was so used to mucking things up. And then when things start going well, it's like, it's that sabotage mechanism. And I'm not used to things going really, really well. Boys are growing up, we've got a young daughter, we're living in Terry Hills, things are going well, business is going well, everything's going well, and oh my God, I'm absolutely terrified of it. And because I'm unable to voice that to another, an integral part of our recovery is sharing what's going on with another and having it voiced back to make sure we get that story straight. And I was unable to do that. I think it was my ego saying, she'll be right, mate, you'll be able to deal with this on your own. I cannot deal with anything on my own, let alone something that enormous. And it's beginning to undo things. The things that were keeping me sober was service, going to regular meetings, speaking with others, and being as honest as I possibly could. And things began to run off course a little bit, where I'm not able to voice how terrified I was about how well things were going. And that voice began to twist in on itself. You guys seen Lord of the Rings? Two Towers. Worm tongue talking to King Theoden. There's that greasy, dirty man whispering. And that's exactly what it was like. Look at you, mate. Look how well you're going. You know, it's the alcoholic ego voice. Look how well you're going. You don't need to do those meetings anymore. Look at all this service. You don't need to. Look how well you're going. And that voice began to twist in on itself. And slowly but surely I began to unplug from the life support machine that was keeping me alive. Regular meetings, speaking with others, doing service, remaining honest. And I began to unplug myself from that life support machine. You see what happens when you unplug somebody from a life support machine? Yes? Slowly but surely I'm beginning to do that. 3 to 4 meetings then a week for me. Began 3 or 4 meetings every 2 weeks, 3 to 4 meetings every month, 3 to 4 every 3 months. I'm gone. Unplugged, untethered, out. And forgetting why I don't drink, why I can't drink, because things go a little bit awry when I drink. 8, 9 months have progressed, and it's our 9th wedding anniversary. And Mum had gathered the courage to look after the twins and my daughter. They were 9 and Grace would have been about 5. And we've got a night on our own. And we've booked a room in town. And it was one of these gorgeous nights. And look, as human beings, the way we are designed, physiologically and psychologically, the way we are designed is to forget how painful things are. It's the way we're wired. We forget how painful things are. If I was to remember what it was like to slice my little finger off, I'd still be yelling at you because it really hurt. You girls have had babies, drug-free, you wouldn't do it again. But we forget, don't we? Anyways, I've forgotten why I don't drink. It's our 9th wedding anniversary. Things are going really well. Mum's got the kids. We've got a night on our own. We're down at Circular Quay. Mandy's forgotten how painful things were at the beginning of our relationship. And I've forgotten why I don't drink. And there's no anger nor malice when I share this with you. Mandy said to me this night, John, we've never really been able to have a drink together. Do you think you could have a beer with me tonight? Here's the girl who I love, give me permission to have a drink. The girl that I dragged through a couple of years of carnage at the beginning of a relationship, give me permission to have a drink. What do alcoholics want to do? Drink. I had 4 beers that night, and you know what? It was one of the best nights we've ever had. But I knew in the back of my mind and the bottom of my heart that really, I really ought not be doing this. As soon as that first beer went in, I'm projecting straight away. I'm setting up buying a 6-pack the next Saturday. For Mandy, she thought that was it. 4 beers that night, that's it. But as soon as that first beer went in, that's it. Everything was poof. What I'm about to share with you is the progressivity of alcoholism in John and how swiftly the progress is downhill as soon as alcohol goes into this body. So that Saturday night, 4 beers. The next Saturday I bought a 6-pack. Man, he said, what the are you doing? And it was all right last week. It's going to be okay now. The next day, I was drinking more than I was 7.5 years beforehand. The next day. That has had to head into some exceedingly dark territory. That was to last for 3.5 years. That brings us through to 2008. And I've lurched home again, drunk as a skunk. And Mandy'd had enough, all her fear and anger, disappointment, discouragement. She'd had enough. And I don't blame her. I look back now and think, Jesus. And I've tumbled through that door, and as I just shared with you, fear, anger, disappointment, discouragement is all just pinpricked into this moment. And she has looked me in the eye and she said, how much have you had to drink today? And I've done that very typical alcoholic answer where I've gone, 2? Which wasn't a lie. I'd had 2 bottles of vodka under my belt. I cannot remember the exact dynamic because of how much alcohol I had in my system. I think I scared Mandy, but she deservedly so. Finger in my chest, that's it. That is it. And it was pure, blinding fury. That is it. I cannot sit by and watch you kill yourself slowly in front of me and the children. You've got 6 weeks to get it together because, mate, I will not be the one who is leaving. That was December the 3rd, 2008. December the 8th, 2008, I made a phone call to South Pacific Private Hospital. They said, yes, John, of course we've got a bed for you. Not one of my most spectacular ideas, but I put the drink down 2 days before I went into that hospital. And really, for the volume that I was drinking and they're just stopping like that, again, not one of my most spectacular ideas. I really should have gone in there drunk and be medicated off it. Because people can actually die doing that sort of stuff, into seizure. And I was so exceedingly ill when I entered that facility. But it was, so December the 22nd, I got in there, and it was a good idea that I did Christmas and New Year that year, because if I didn't, I don't think I'd be here now, being able to do what I'm doing now. And it was in there that I knew I really had to apply myself. Mandy really didn't need to take me down there, but she's a very kind, compassionate, generous, powerful soul. And she took me down there, she drove me down there. I got that monkey mind chatter going on in my head, you know, you've been here before, you should ring your sponsor, maybe you go back to AA. That mindless monkey mind chatter forever going on in my head, even as I'm walking up to the door of that hospital. And there was the other voice. That day it sounded like Dr. Phil. How's that working for you, John? You know? There's a sign in that treatment centre that says, expect a miracle. When you walk in the threshold of that facility, there's a sign that says, expect a miracle. That day, I didn't see that. But let me share with you something. I was in that hospital for 35 days. And it was on the 22nd day it dawned upon me that for 22 days, not once have I wanted to have a drink. As soon as I stepped through the threshold of that facility, the compulsion to drink had been removed out of me. It's as if something has reached into me and said, let me deal with that for you. You deal with the stuff that got you drinking in the first place. And it was one of those giant, you know how you have those aha moments? Yes, I have a lot of duh moments. But it was, for 22 days, not once. As soon as I stepped through the threshold of that facility, the compulsion to drink had been removed, just like that. That's miracle number 1. Miracle number 2 that I share with you is a dream I had about Dad, about my father. At that particular stage, this dream that I had this dream 6 weeks before I entered the facility. And I was in that facility for 4 weeks before I remembered that I'd had that dream. So it was a 10-week gap between having the dream and remembering it. And this dream was so extraordinarily vivid, so extraordinarily weird. All right, I'm just going to let you know that so you don't think I don't know that it's really weird. All right? I'm not about to give you a metaphysical hernia over it. It was just a dream I'm about to share with you, okay? So let me preface what I'm about to say with you, what I'll say to you now is a little bit of backstory about my adopted dad. He was 52, a little bit younger than I am now. He's 52 years old when I was born. And he's very, very kind, very generous, physically always present, emotionally and spiritually unavailable. even as a young boy. It was beyond my capacity to be able to language, that I knew that I needed a good, strong male role model in my life that he was unable to give me. No anger nor malice when I share that with you, it's just the way it was. He was a man that was considerably older than Mum, a hell of a lot older than I was, unable to give to me what it was that I needed. He didn't know, I didn't know, and he was very stoic, very quiet. When he spoke, you listened, and I really wanted to be close to him, but I couldn't. I'd want to sit and talk, but he wouldn't. But in this dream, he's got his hand under my bum and other hand back of my neck, and I could smell him. I could feel his whiskers against my face. I could smell the Old Spice aftershave. I could smell the Borkham Riff pipe tobacco that he used to smoke. And for the first time in my life, I felt what I suspect many a son feels about their father. I felt loved, and I felt safe, and I felt secure in this body of a little boy, knowing what I knew then as a 43-year-old man, being held by my father. And the really weird thing is that Dad then had been dead for 17 years, and we were standing on his grave. And Dad's buried up in Blackheath. So we're standing on this grave, and he sat me down on the pebbles, and he's pointed at the headstone. He said, "Have a look at this." And I said, "What are we looking at, Dad?" And he said, look at these dates. 6th of April 1914 dash, 7th of May 1991. He said, it's that dash between those dates that all our lives amount to. Yours right now really isn't amounting to what you know it could be. Perhaps you'd best be off to do what it is you know you need to do. And then he slid me back across those cold white pebbles, and he's pointed at that headstone. He said, "Now look. R.I.P., rest in peace." And I said, "Dad, what? He said, "You do not need to be dead like me to rest in peace today." I had no idea then of how enormous an impact that dream has had upon my life, where I know what it is now to rest in peace today. Do I look dead to you? I hope not. I know what it is to rest in peace today, only for the help of others. I cannot. There is no way in the world that I can do my life on my own. I need the help of others. And it took me a long time. That honesty was really hard for me to learn how to do. Responsibility took me a long time. Adulting is really hard for me. All right? I only learnt that about half an hour ago. It's really hard. And I need to be surrounded by others to be able to learn to live a life that is well worth living. And Dad was right. Do not need to be dead like him then to rest in peace today. I get to be able to do that now. Those powerful people that I shared with you tonight about, my mother, my wife, my sister, my daughter, my sons, are all here tonight. And that I cannot begin to express how extraordinarily blessed I feel to be able to do that, because they have certainly been a hell of a lot better mother, wife, sister, son's daughter than I've been a son and a brother and a father to them. And for that, I'm very, very grateful. Thank you for letting me share. Thank you. Thank you for coming along.